Well, hello and welcome. This is Alex Makarski with another episode of Startup Gizmo. And today I have with me Luke Szyrmer, hanging out with me from London on the opposite end of the pond. But he's sporting a nice shirt that says University of Pennsylvania, I take it. So I guess there's a story coming up. Luke is a sort of actually authority in all things lean and startup, and he's the one who runs lean coffee events in London. And he is an author of Launch Tomorrow, the book on launching a startup, a tech startup, I presume. And that hit #1 on Amazon in its category recently. So congratulations on the book, Luke, and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, it's great to catch up with you.
Awesome. So what's up with this Pennsylvania theme going on here?
Well, I grew up in the area, but yeah, it's I went there a while ago and graduated, and yeah, it was a good time, and it yeah, taught me quite a lot. Did economics there a long time ago, but yeah, somehow I got into IT, and it's stuck on me for 20 years or more at this point, so in various forms. Yeah, so
Right. So what led you to writing the book?
so the main reason is that I at some point tried to create a product that I thought would be relevant for hedge funds here in London. It was about the time YouTube was becoming a thing, and it was a video website, and aimed specifically at that vertical, which at the time I thought was a great idea, and I put a lot of heart and soul and savings into it. And after basically launching it, it turned out that they weren't really all that interested, and it didn't resonate with them pretty much at all. And I realized that even though I, from a technical standpoint, had something that was working, that clearly wasn't enough. That I very much had a marketing problem. And at some point, about 2 or 3 years later, I discovered the work of Eric Ries, the Lean Startup. And one of the things that he advocates there is going out and speaking with customers, interacting with them long before you even start building a specific product, just to be able to really understand who it is that you're creating something for. And over time, the part that I found the most interesting was the something that he briefly describes in the Lean Startup over a couple of pages. It's using a landing page to test out a product idea. So it's kind of like a smoke test, where all you're trying to figure out is, I mean, originally the term smoke test comes from electrical engineering. So basically, if you plug it in, does smoke come out of it? So here it's a slightly different connotation. So basically, it's just a minimum, like just a quick test to make sure that if you are going to go in a certain direction from a marketing point of view, there is actually somebody who's there, who's waiting for that product to be made.
If it's even worth putting any more effort into it.
Exactly. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
So, and it's a slightly different way of approaching the whole topic than, on one hand, customer development, which I just mentioned, because there you're trying to get lots of information and speak with lots of people. And it's also different kind of than conversion rate optimization, where you already have something that you're selling and you just want to be able to sell better. And that mentality, that framework, other than, that sliver within the Lean Startup, and occasionally mentioned here or there, nobody is really covering that. And I realized that it's something worth testing on its own. So what I did was I went to a site called LeanPub, which essentially let me start writing a book, basically describe a book without necessarily having it done yet, and to see if people would start buying. And lo and behold, people did start paying me, even though it wasn't done, and they were happy to wait for me to finish it. And which basically proved that there clearly was unmet demand for this particular topic. And I went ahead and created it and launched it, and yeah, and it
Nice.
did quite well.
I didn't know you used LeanPub. I love the concept. I think they certainly have their own uh, place in the publishing universe. Figured out very well. They have their own unique selling proposition. Figured out very
Yeah,
well. Yeah, beautiful,
yeah, I
beautiful
think so.
concept.
Yeah, especially since pretty much everyone I talk to in terms of publishing, I mean, publishing just it seems like one of these really irreformable industries. So it's yeah, LeanPub's one of a number of startups that are trying to do something that's allowing authors certainly to interact with their audiences. And yeah, I mean, for me, it was more of like a product creator hat. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'd be talking with lots of entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs mostly, through people I'd meet through the meetup, and just seeing what they actually needed, if they were doing these kind of tests, or if they were doing lean startup. And I tried to condense all of that into a nice, usable, actionable format. So,
And condense you did. I must say it's a pretty thick read. Like I went through a good chunk of the book. It's a lot of stuff packed into just one book.
mm,
You can probably expand it into like a trilogy or I don't know, a series of 5 books or something easily.
yeah, yeah, do like a Game of Thrones theme or something.
You could, you could. There's no one
Yeah.
there to stop you. So who should avail themselves to your book? Like who's it for?
Sure. So I think it's going to be most relevant for people who are creating a product, certainly within technology. Most lean startup techniques tend to be useful when there's a lot of uncertainty, especially around market demand, and also possibly at the same time, usually around the actual thing that's being created. So it's going to be when there's a lot of unknowns, especially if you're concerned about unknown unknowns, then these techniques are quite useful. And then specifically the landing page MVP technique, it's best suited for somebody who's been
And
already.
just so that someone uninitiated understands what MVP is, it stands for.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, sure. So MVP stands for minimum viable product. So this is a term that Eric Ries popularized. It's not actually something he came up with. And the idea is that it's some kind of a product or something similar to a product that you create only for the purpose of testing one specific thing at a given moment. So with a landing page MVP, what essentially you're trying to do is creating a landing page to make it look like you have a product or that you're preparing a product, and either simulate a checkout type of scenario where somebody tries to buy the product, and essentially you either return them their money, but knowing that there are people who are willing to pay for the product, or for example, you pre-sell, where you clearly say on the landing page that the product is still being prepared, but if you buy now, you can buy it for less, for example. That's another.
Most recent example being Elon Musk pre-selling a bunch of cars to a whole bunch of people. That's a
Exactly.
very good example of MVP.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in that sense, yeah, yeah. But yeah, so the critical thing, I mean, a lot of people debate whether, is the minimum the most important part? Is it the fact that it's a product, or is the viable bit important? And actually, if anything, of those three, probably the viable bit is the most important, where you're trying to figure out if something is viable. But beyond stepping back behind that, it always needs to be framed as an experiment. So, what are you trying to learn? And you state it as a hypothesis with a specific success criterion. Then you go and you execute, and then you step back and say, okay, is that hypothesis true or not? And based on that type of using that kind of an approach, you can find out a lot that you don't know, and essentially de-risk quite complicated, complex ideas, which would otherwise be which would be very easy to run into the ground, basically. So you're basically chipping away all of the bad stuff and just focusing on how a particular product idea could work. And if you look at most of the big companies, tech companies today, if you look at their early days, almost every single one of them had a major pivot early in its history. So, for example, Twitter started out as a podcasting service, and when they were running out of money, they created this thing that did short blogging with 140 characters, and that just took off. If you look at
well, Airbnb thought people would want to put air mattresses and spare rooms, and that's how they started. And that's why it's called Airbnb, right?
Yeah, exactly. So in fact, that the story behind that is that they were putting mattresses in rooms because that was the way that they were making money until they find their big idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then they realize that actually is their big idea, that it's that renting out spare rooms is actually a massive market, and it's a complete disruption of the hotel industry. But yeah, so they were making money with all kinds of things like selling cereal boxes with political messages and all kinds of stuff just to be able to make ends meet. And yeah, I mean, it turned out that that's actually what took off. So yeah, I mean, regardless of whether or not all of these startups were doing a strict lean startup process, I think some of them were doing more so than others. Certainly, Dropbox is quite a famous case study for lean startup. There's quite a few other reasonably big ones nowadays coming from that whole camp. It's just a way of being very structured about learning what it is you don't know, and and that's the actual niche that my book Launch Tomorrow fills is how you do that online. So it's with web pages, with advertising, as you have people going online, interacting with your product, whether it's just that landing page or it's more. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of testing that you can do, and essentially market research as you're expanding the product.
So the product doesn't have to be a technical product or an online product necessarily. It's just that you target people who launch a product online.
Yes. So I think at some point, most products will have some kind of an online presence, and in fact, it's enough just to have one landing page to do this kind of testing. And you can do things such as, first of all, like I was saying before, testing if there is demand, testing how your path to market looks. So, for example, whether or not paid advertising is a good source of traffic for you. So whether Facebook and AdWords would be good for you, how much that would cost. As you are buying those, a thing that's really valuable to test at that point is a value proposition and a hook into your audience. So even if you don't end up using paid advertising as your ultimate traffic source, at least you've got a tested message that's clear, that speaks to your intended audience, and that you also have tested in terms of that it ultimately leads to sales. So you can still continue, you can essentially build out your funnel as you're initially buying traffic, then afterwards you can switch to a completely different kind of traffic, but at least you know the funnel works. And you've
Right.
got a sense of what the statistical, what percent of people actually who come to your page end up checking out, and then you can do all kinds of things based on that.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that's the big idea. And yeah, I think specifically with Launch Tomorrow, the idea was what I wanted to do was to compress into one day a whole series of quick testing tools and planning tools to be able to set up a landing page and buy some advertising, and already do a whole series of tests before you even buy that advertising, so that when the people do come and see your page, at least you're reasonably confident that you are presenting what you think you're presenting, which is actually a more common problem than most people think. That it's completely unclear to people coming, even though you think it's clear to you. Or also to make sure that your pages are loading, that that you're actually addressing the right kind of people in the right kind of way, and that you're really empathizing with your audience. So it isn't just talking about my gadget, but actually trying to relate that to a particular type of person who you think it'll be relevant for. And then it ends up influencing everything, your language, the way you describe it, the way, and then of course you can still test variants of that once you are actually sending people to the page.
So basically, with this approach, with the Launch Tomorrow approach, you never put more money at risk than absolutely necessary to figure out like if it's worth taking the next step, and also you're buying some data to tell you which direction you should take this step in.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
So you're limiting your financial risk by controlling your ad spend, and at the same time you're essentially buying market intelligence.
Awesome. How did you go about promoting your book?
So in terms of promotion, it was largely based on my activity through the meetup. So part of that was just people that I met there, of course, initially. I think the launch itself was, I guess at this point you could say the relatively standard things you would do at a book launch. So I had a contest for some books by Alex Osterwalder, who's a well-known lean startup guy that he signed because he'd done an event earlier. And
Is that
also
the business canvas guy?
Yeah, business model canvas guy. Yeah, and then also I'd met a couple of other people coming through London that were doing events. So a lot of them helped, tweet to their audiences about it. So that kind of got the word out. And I just did a 5-day free launch window. Got a lot of downloads then, and after that, yeah, I mean, there were still a few of the big names that were promoting it once it was in paid mode, let's say, and it did continue doing well after that, and it's been doing okay since. I mean, I think at this point, more of my sales come directly on my site than they do on Amazon, but it's doing well. So,
Congratulations.
yeah,
Speaking of which, what is the website where one should go to buy the book?
Sure. So, I mean, the website where you can go is www.launchtomorrow.com, and yeah.
Domain was available for you.
What's that?
You could find a .com domain for that.
Yeah, it was very much so.
People complain all the time they can't find a good .com domain, and you just proved them wrong.
Yeah, you can, but it takes some time, and in my case also some testing, which I describe in the book. But in terms of what domain I actually ended up using, but yeah, it was that combination. It was available, and it clearly people liked it. So
Well, why don't you take us through this example, through this case study, how you came up with the domain name?
sure, sure. So unlike I guess unlike Tim Ferriss who used AdWords, I mean at this point to use AdWords just to test something like a name is a bit excessive. But I mean depends on your cost and your budget.
And again, sorry, I need to open up the shorthand we're using in this conversation a little bit for someone who might not be familiar with the example. So we're talking about the 4-hour work week. We
Yes,
started out as a totally different book, well, totally different title originally.
yes.
And
So
Tim Ferriss went to Google AdWords, ran a few ads, and he came up with the 4-hour work week as the winning one. And that's the title he went to print with.
yes, exactly. Yeah, the original title was Drug Dealing for Fun and Profit.
There you
So
go.
yeah, so yeah, 4-hour work week I think just resonated on AdWords certainly more. And at the time when he was doing it in 2009, I think it was or seven, something like that. Yeah, I mean clicks generally across the board were a bit cheaper than they are now.
For sure.
So I actually ended up using one of a tool called PickFu. Now, the way PickFu works is that it hooks into something called Amazon Mechanical Turk, which is a service Amazon provides where people do small tasks in return for a small amount of money, and it's done at a large scale. And they provide an ability for programmers to hook into that and then have, instead of a computer do something, have a person do it.
Mm-hmm.
So in this particular case, what PickFu did, I mean, PickFu is one of a number of services like this, but what PickFu did is they created a system where they have people vote on two different options of something. So for example, titles or images or domain names or um, anything like that. And the way that I did it was I initially came up with, I believe, 8 different names, and pitted them against each other. And this was the one that came up to the top. I mean, to be honest, most of the ones that I did discard tended to be pretty, I guess, abstract. So
Do you remember some of the losers?
um, it I'd have to check.
Did
To
you
get
go and check
to
like
get a good one.
if all the .coms available for all of those?
I think the ones that I ended up putting in, I'd already pre-checked that the .com was available. Yeah.
Okay.
One of the ones that I think was a near win was Make the First Sale, but it. I think the whole launch tomorrow thing. I mean, it just
I love the
clearly.
title. I honestly do. Like Launch Tomorrow is awesome, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I think it hits the right notes, and it also gave. It also, to some extent, gave the book some structure because then it really focused me on that 1 day launch sequence, that pre-launch sequence, to get ready to get that page up and do a whole bunch of things that you can do in say 15 minutes each that end up actually, if you accumulate them together, have a very big effect uh, on the actual outcome. So the page that you do put up, and when you do buy ads and send people there, that it's much more likely to at least have any kind of obvious things wrong with it to not go bad.
Cool. How much did the whole experiment cost you, if you remember?
That's a great question. I'm not sure off the top of my head. With In terms of just PickFu, I think at the time it was $10 a test. I think
Mm-hmm.
now they're $20 a test. So that would have been just the PickFu side of it would have been what, $70
Mm-hmm.
US. Um, which yeah, for that amount of money on AdWords, it would have been much harder to get statistically significant data. Now, I guess the caveat here is that with PickFu, it's more people telling you about how they feel. It's not them actually being put in a decision where in a situation where they need to make some kind of a decision, like a purchase or something like that. So you can't always assume it's going to be the same, but
Right.
given where I was, given with the book at the time, it just it clicked, and like I said, it also ended up feeding back into my product development process too. So at that point, it's just okay, this is the direction I'm going.
Wonderful. That's a great lesson, a great tip. Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right. Any other tips that stick out for you, like from your publishing process, or anything that's in the book that you'd want to open up a little bit?
Sure. I think one of the biggest surprises for me was that in terms of landing pages and products and everything, was that if you look at kind of audience selection, what it is that you offer, and what's on the landing page, of the three, what makes the biggest difference in terms of response, in terms of sales, is the actual audience selection. And it's not like a 10% larger difference. It's a 7 times larger, comparing the audience selection to the landing page. So basically, the importance of selecting your audience and making sure you really understand them is much larger than whatever you put on your landing page. In other words, whatever it is your product is actually much less important than really understanding your audience. And in terms of the proportions, in terms of how to operationalize this, especially from the beginning, those are the proportions where I suggest to people that that's how they should be spending their time and money. So basically, 62% of their time should be spent on analyzing the audience. 26% is figuring out what to offer them, and then the rest, the kind of 12%ish, is actually designing the landing page. And the funny thing is, I certainly was thinking in these terms myself. When you think of something like a landing page MVP or any kind of, you start thinking about what's on the landing page, how it looks, how it flows, how it this and that. But actually, it's the off landing page factors that make it succeed. And it's being really clear on who your audience is and what segment you're going after initially, and that part of it is much more important than the actual product idea even. And on a purely intuitive level, if you look at in terms of audience selection, there's certain groups, like for example, if you go into like a knitting club of senior citizens, you're gonna have a hard time selling something like a Metallica T-shirt or it just.
You never know. Metallica, I think they're old enough these days.
They are holding up actually, but
they're old enough.
How many of them are old enough exactly that you might make a sale or two. I'm not saying you won't sell any, but I'd be quite surprised if you'd actually get close to 100% conversion rate in that kind of environment. But if you were selling, I don't know, knitting accessories or something, then that's a very different discussion.
Yeah.
So it's essentially that kind of thing, which, if you're starting out completely from scratch, you're entering into a new market with a new product idea, figuring out how to connect those two is critical. And the faster you do it, and the cheaper you do it, the better off you're going to be.
Awesome. All right. Well, congratulations again on hitting #1 on Amazon in your category. Awesome book. I recommend it to everyone. I have it on my Kindle. And the website where someone would go to and buy your book is launchtomorrow.com. And thank you very much, Luke Szyrmer. our lean startup expert. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alex.